There is a version of you that already has everything you desire. I have seen this version. Not in fantasy, but in the only realm that truly exists, imagination. This version of you walks differently, speaks differently, sleeps in peace because the battle is already won. And here is what breaks my heart. That version of you is calling out, wondering why you refuse to come home. You are in exile from your own fulfilled self, wandering in the far country of not yet, eating the husks of hope, when the Father's house, your true state, has been prepared and waiting. Will you return? Or will you die in the land of someday? You need to hear this because you've been lied to, not by me, not by the world, but by your own senses. You've been told that what you see is what is real, that circumstances are facts, that time moves in one direction, and that you must work your way toward what you want. These are not truths. They are limitations you've accepted as truth, and they are killing the God within you. The core pain you're experiencing right now, whether you can name it or not, is the agony of separation. You are separated from your desired state, not by distance, not by time, not by worthiness, but by assumption. You assume yourself to be what you are not, and that false assumption hardens into the prison you call my life. You look at your bank account and assume poverty. You look at your empty bed and assume loneliness. You look at your body and assume limitation. And because assumption creates reality, you experience exactly what you assume. Here's what common advice tells you. Be patient. Work hard. Stay positive. Visualize your goals. Trust the process. Surrender and let go. But these are half-truths at best. And at worst, they keep you locked in the consciousness of desire, which is the consciousness of lack. When you desire something, you confess you don't have it. When you hope for something, you admit it's not here yet. When you wait for something, you push it further into the future. I offer you something radically different. The consciousness of fulfillment now, not hope, not faith in the future, but the lived experience of already being the person you desire to be, already possessing what you seek, already dwelling in the state where your wish is fulfilled. This is not fantasy. This is not positive thinking. This is not delusion. This is the law of assumption, the law by which all things come into being. What makes this different from every other teaching you've encountered is this. I do not tell you to believe in God out there somewhere, watching you from the sky, judging whether you're worthy. I do not tell you to manipulate energy or align with frequencies or attract things from the universe. I tell you that you are the operant power. Your consciousness, your I am, is the creator of your world. When you say I am, you are speaking the name of God, and whatever follows those words becomes the creative command that shapes your reality. The unique insight you will walk away with today is the understanding that creation is finished. Everything you could ever want already exists as a state of consciousness. You are not creating something new. You are selecting which already existing state you will occupy. And you select it not by wishing, not by hoping, not by begging, but by assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled and remaining faithful to that assumption until it hardens into fact. This is not motivational speaking. This is mystical instruction, and it will set you free. Now let me tell you about the night I discovered that the world is not what it appears to be. I was in my small apartment in New York City, lying on my bed, physically immobilized. My body was there, heavy, still, breathing slowly. But I, the awareness that says I am, was fully conscious. And in that state, suspended between waking and sleeping, I found myself standing in the dining room of a country inn, hundreds of miles away, in some remote yesteryear's countryside. I was not dreaming. Listen to me carefully. I was there. As awake as you are now listening to these words, I could see the wooden tables, smell the food, hear the murmur of conversation. I knew with absolute certainty that my physical body was back in New York, immobilized on my bed. Yet here I was, as conscious as I have ever been, in a completely different location, in what seemed to be a different time. And in that moment, standing in that dining room, I realized something that would change everything I thought I knew about reality. Imagination is not a fantasy-making faculty. It is not daydreaming. It is not pretending. Imagination is the door to other worlds, other states, other versions of what we call reality. Imagination is the very substance of which all things are made. I intuitively knew that if I could stop the activity of my mind, everything before me would freeze. The thought was born, and immediately the urge to try it possessed me. So I stilled my mind. I stopped all mental activity. And do you know what happened? The entire scene froze. The people stopped mid-motion. The sound ceased. Everything became like a photograph, perfectly still, suspended in that moment. And I knew with a certainty that burned in my chest, that I was not in a dream. I was in imagination, and imagination is the only reality. When I returned to my body, when I felt the weight of flesh and bone again, when I opened my eyes to see the familiar ceiling of my New York apartment, I was not the same man who had lain down on that bed. Because I had walked beyond the boundaries of what people call the real world. I had discovered that space is not what we think it is, time is not what we think it is, and matter, solid, immovable matter, is not what we think it is. I tell you this not to impress you with mystical experiences. I tell you this to shatter the glass ceiling you've placed over what's possible. You think you're bound by space. You think you're trapped in time. You think circumstances are fixed, immovable facts. But I have walked beyond those boundaries, and I've discovered that they are not laws of nature. They are assumptions you've made about the nature of your being. The invisible is more real than the visible. The imaginal is more solid than the physical. What you call the real world is nothing but imagination pushed out and solidified. Your entire life, everything you see, everything you experience, is your own wonderful human imagination expressing itself in the form called objective reality. And if imagination can take me from New York to a country inn without moving my body, if imagination can freeze time itself, if imagination can create worlds within worlds, then what can't imagination do? What desire is too great for the power that creates universes? What wish is impossible for the force that spoke all things into being? I asked myself many times after that experience, if my imagination is Christ Jesus, and all things are possible to Christ Jesus, are all things possible to me? And through years of testing, through countless experiments, through both failures and successes, I came to know with absolute certainty, yes, all things are possible to imagination. And imagination is not separate from you. Imagination is you, the real you, the eternal you, the God you. Now let me tell you about another night, another revelation that came not to me, but through me, to show you that what I teach is not theory, it is law. A woman once wrote to me about her child. The doctors had given their verdict. Terminal, incurable, days, perhaps hours left. The family had gathered. The goodbye had been spoken. The child lay in the hospital bed, pale, fading, slipping away from this world. But this woman understood something that most people never learn. She understood that the past is not fixed. She understood that what appears to be happening is only happening because she is assuming it to be so. She understood that if she could change her assumption, if she could revise the scene, if she could live from a different state of consciousness, the entire situation would have to rearrange itself to match her new assumption. So she did something that the world would call insane. She revised, right there, standing beside her dying child. She closed her eyes and she rewrote the scene. She didn't pray to God to change it. She didn't beg the universe for a miracle. She didn't hope for the best. She assumed. She assumed healing as an accomplished fact. She felt her child whole, healthy, laughing, running, alive. She heard the sound of her child's voice calling her name. She felt the warmth of her child's hand in hers. She experienced, in imagination, the relief, the gratitude, the overwhelming joy of crisis averted, of death defeated, of life restored. And she didn't do this once and then return to fear. She lived in that assumption. Every time doubt arose, she returned to the revised scene. Every time someone spoke of death, she heard life. Every time her eyes saw the pale form in the hospital bed, her imagination saw vitality and health. She lived from the end, not toward it. She didn't hope her child would be healed. She knew her child was healed. Past tense, already accomplished, done. Within days, not months, not weeks, but days, the child's condition began to reverse. The color returned, the breath deepened, the eyes opened. The doctors who had pronounced the death sentence now stood baffled, without explanation, calling it spontaneous remission, calling it miracle, calling it anything but what it was. The law of assumption in operation. That woman didn't beg God for her child's life. She assumed life. She didn't hope for healing. She assumed healing. She didn't wait for change. She changed her state of consciousness, and the outer world had no choice but to conform to her inner conviction. This is not one isolated incident. I could tell you 100 such stories, 1,000. The man who revised himself out of bankruptcy, the woman who assumed marriage and saw it materialize within weeks, the person who imagined health and watched tumors dissolve. These are not anomalies. They are the natural result of understanding and applying the law. But here's what stops most people. They hear these stories and they think, that's wonderful for them, but it couldn't work for me. My situation is different. My problem is too big. My circumstances are too fixed. My past is too heavy. And in thinking this, in assuming this, they make it true, because assumption creates reality. If you assume you are the exception to the law, you will experience yourself as the exception. Not because the law doesn't work for you, but because the law is working perfectly, manifesting your assumption that it doesn't work for you. Let me give you a parable. Imagine you are asleep right now, dreaming. In the dream, you are poor, struggling, desperate. You cry out for help. You search for answers. You work harder, try different strategies, beg for rescue. But no matter what you do, the poverty persists, because you are trying to change the dream from within the dream. You are a dream character, trying to fix a dream problem, not realizing that the entire scenario is imagination. Then you wake up, and in waking, you realize the poverty was never real. The struggle was imagination. The desperation was a state you occupied, not a fact of existence. And now that you're awake, you can simply close your eyes again and dream a different dream. You can dream abundance instead of poverty. You can dream joy instead of suffering. You can dream freedom instead of bondage. Because you, the dreamer, are the creator of the dream. This is your life. You are asleep, dreaming yourself to be limited, bound, lacking, unworthy, trapped. And the tragedy is not that the dream is bad. The tragedy is that you think it's the only dream you can have. You've forgotten that the dreamer is God, and the dreamer can dream anything. The Bible tells us that God put Adam into a deep sleep, and nowhere in Scripture does it say that Adam woke up. You are Adam. You are asleep, dreaming yourself to be this limited creature bound by time and space, subject to circumstances, victim of conditions, and your awakening is the birth of Christ in you. Christ is not a person who lived 2,000 years ago. Christ is your own wonderful human imagination awakening to its true identity as God. When Christ awakens in you, you discover that you are not the dream, you are the dreamer. You are not the creation, you are the creator. You are not the branch, you are the vine. And just as the branch has no life except it abide in the vine, nothing in your world has life except it abide in your consciousness. Let me tell you about my teacher, Abdullah. He was the one who first revealed this principle to me, though I fought against it at first. I was in New York. Winter was approaching. I wanted desperately to go home to Barbados to see my family. But I had no money for passage, no prospects, no logical way to make the trip happen. I mentioned this desire to Abdullah, expecting perhaps some mystical technique, some ritual, some method to attract the money I needed. Instead, he looked at me and said something that made no sense. You are in Barbados, not you will go to Barbados. Not you can go to Barbados if you work hard enough or pray hard enough. But you are in Barbados, present tense, already accomplished, already done. I argued with him. Abdullah, I said, I am here in New York. Winter is coming. I have no money. I have no ticket. How can you say I am in Barbados? And he looked at me with those penetrating eyes and said, You are not going to Barbados. You are in Barbados. And then he gave me the instruction that changed my life. Sleep this night as though you were in Barbados, not wishing to be there, not hoping to be there, but assuming you are there. Imagine yourself right into the state of your fulfilled desire and fall asleep viewing the world from Barbados. So that night, I did. I lay in my bed in cold New York City, and I imagined I was lying in my father's house in Barbados. I felt the warm tropical breeze on my skin. I heard the familiar sounds of home. I smelled the air, that unique combination of sea and vegetation that belongs only to that island. I didn't think of Barbados. I thought from Barbados. I didn't visualize myself there. I was there, viewing the world from that standpoint. And I didn't do it once. I did it every night. Night after night, I fell asleep in the assumption that I was in my father's house in Barbados, not hoping to be there someday, not wishing I could be there, but assuming I already was there, living in the end, occupying the state of the wish fulfilled. Within 1 month, I received a letter from my brother. He wrote that he had a strong desire to have the family together at Christmas, and he was enclosing a steamship ticket for me to come home to Barbados. I sailed 2 days after receiving that letter, and I spent a wonderful winter in Barbados, exactly as I had imagined. Now, here's what's important to understand. My brother thought it was his idea to send me the ticket. To him, it seemed like a spontaneous desire that arose in his consciousness. But I know what really happened. By the intensity of my imagination, by feeling myself to be in Barbados instead of merely thinking about Barbados, I had spanned the vast Atlantic to influence my brother into desiring my presence to complete the family circle at Christmas. Thinking from the end, from the feeling of my wish fulfilled, was the source of everything that happened as outer cause. My brother's impulse to send the ticket was not the cause of my going to Barbados. It was the effect. The cause was my assumption. The cause was my imagination. The cause was my dwelling in the state of already being there. This is the principle you must understand if you want your life to change. The outer world is effect. Consciousness is cause. Circumstances are shadows. Assumption is substance. What you see around you is not causing your life. Your life is causing what you see around you. Change the inner, and the outer must follow. Change your state of consciousness, and your state of experience must change to match it. But you have to do it the way Abdullah taught me. You cannot think of your desire. You must think from your desire. You cannot wish to be there. You must assume you are there. You cannot hope for the future. You must live in the end now, in imagination, and carry that state with you until it hardens into fact. Now let me lay the foundation clearly. Let me give you the principle upon which everything else rests. Consciousness is the only reality, not matter, not energy, not the physical world. Consciousness. What you are aware of being, you are. What you are not aware of being, you are not, regardless of what you appear to be in the eyes of others. I am the Lord. Do you know what that means? Not I will be the Lord someday if I'm good enough. Not I hope to become the Lord, but I am, present tense, right now. Your awareness of being, your consciousness, your sense of I am, is the Lord and Creator of your world. There is no other God. There is no power outside of your own consciousness. There is no force separate from your I am. This is why the Bible tells us, I am that I am. This is the name of God, not a name referring to some being separate from you, watching you from above, but the very feeling of awareness within you, the knowledge that you exist, the consciousness that says I am. That is God, and that God is you. When you say I am, you are speaking the name of God, and whatever you attach to those words becomes your creative decree. I am wealthy, I am healthy, I am loved, I am free. These are not wishful affirmations. They are statements of being. They are creative commands spoken by God Himself, which is your own wonderful I am. But most people misuse this power completely. They say, I am poor, I am sick, I am lonely, I am stuck. And because I am is God, and God's word cannot return void, they experience exactly what they decree. Then they wonder why life is so hard, why nothing works for them, why they're always struggling. They don't realize they are the authors of their own misery through their own I am declarations. The world you see is not happening to you. It is happening from you. Every person, every event, every condition, every circumstance is your consciousness pushed out, solidified, and reflected back to you as objective reality. Your outer world is a perfect mirror of your inner world. Show me your life and I will tell you what you have been assuming about yourself. If you want to know what you're creating tomorrow, listen to what you're saying to yourself today. Listen to the inner speech. Listen to the silent conversations you have with yourself when no one else can hear. That inner talking is not neutral commentary. It is creative speech. It is the word made flesh. It is consciousness in the act of creation. Your inner speech reveals your state, and your state creates your world. If your inner conversations are full of complaint, your outer world will be full of things to complain about. If your inner speech is full of lack, your outer experience will be full of absence. If your inner talking matches worry, fear, doubt, limitation, then that is exactly what you will experience in your objective world. But if you control your inner speech, if you match it to the wish fulfilled, if you speak to yourself as though you already are what you desire to be, then you set in motion the creative forces that must bring your assumption to pass. This is law. This is not positive thinking. This is not hoping for the best. This is the mechanism by which consciousness creates reality. Let me tell you another principle. Creation is finished. These three words contain a mystery that most will never understand. But if you grasp this, truly grasp it, your entire life will transform. Creation is finished. Everything that could ever exist already exists. Every possible version of your life, every conceivable state of being, every imaginable condition, all of it already exists now, in this eternal present moment, as states of consciousness. Think of it this way. Imagine a vast wardrobe containing every possible costume, every identity, every character you could ever be. The wealthy you exists as a costume hanging in that wardrobe. The healthy you exists. The loved you exists. The free you exists. They are not waiting to be created. They are waiting to be worn. They are waiting for you to select them, to put them on, to occupy them. When you manifest something, you are not bringing it into existence. You are shifting your consciousness into the state where it already exists. You are not creating a new future. You are selecting which already existing future you will experience. This is why it happens instantly in imagination but gradually in appearance. Because there is a time lag between the shift in consciousness and the rearrangement of objective reality to match. William Blake, the great mystic poet, saw this clearly. He wrote that all possible human situations exist as already made states. He called them the sculptures of losses halls. Every aspect of life, every plot and drama, is already worked out as mere possibilities, as long as you are not in them, but as overpowering realities when you are in them. The key word is in. You must get into the state. You cannot stand outside it, thinking about it, wishing for it, hoping to enter it someday. You must enter it now, in imagination, and remain in it until the outer world conforms. This is what I mean by living in the end, not hoping for the end, not working toward the end, but assuming the end is already accomplished and living from that assumption. Let me give you the mechanism. How do you actually do this? How do you shift states? How do you move from the consciousness of lack to the consciousness of fulfillment? The answer is assumption. To assume is to take for granted, to accept as true without proof, to act as if something were already so. Assumption, persisted in, hardens into fact. This is the key. Not assumption tried once and then abandoned when you don't see immediate results, but assumption persisted in, assumption maintained, assumption lived in day after day, night after night, until it becomes the dominant state of your consciousness. Most people assume the worst about their lives and then wonder why the worst happens. They assume lack, and lack appears. They assume limitation, and walls arise everywhere they look. They assume unworthiness, and people treat them as unworthy. They assume failure, and failure dogs their every step. Then they say, "See, I knew it wouldn't work. I knew I couldn't have it. I knew I wasn't good enough." They don't realize they proved the law. They simply proved it in reverse. The law is always working. Assumption always creates reality. But you can use it consciously or unconsciously, positively or negatively. You can assume the best or assume the worst. You can assume fulfillment or assume lack. The law doesn't care which you choose. It simply creates whatever you assume. So, assume the best. Assume the wish fulfilled. Assume yourself to be, to have, to experience everything you desire. And persist in that assumption even when every sense screams otherwise. Even when the bank account says poverty. Even when the mirror says sickness. Even when the empty room says loneliness. Persist, because assumption, persisted in, must harden into fact. It is law. Now let me talk about a force that most people completely ignore, yet it is the most powerful creative force in their lives. Inner speech, the still small voice. The internal dialogue you conduct with yourself every moment of every day. Your inner speech is revealing your imagination, and your imagination is creating your world. Right now, beneath your conscious awareness, you are talking to yourself. You are saying, "I am this, I am that, I can't, I will, I fear, I desire, I remember, I hope." This inner talking is not neutral. It is not passive observation. It is creative speech. It is the word of God being spoken in the secret place of consciousness, and it must take form in your outer world. Hermes, the ancient master, taught that mind and speech are the two gifts that make man immortal. The union of mind and speech, he said, is life itself. Your inner speech is your mind expressing itself, and that expression creates your experience. Control your inner speech, and you control your destiny. Let it run wild. and you are at the mercy of habitual unconscious patterns that may be destroying your life. Listen to yourself right now. What are you saying to yourself about your life? What internal conversations are you having about your circumstances, your future, your worthiness, your possibilities? Are you speaking from the wish fulfilled or from the consciousness of lack? Are you affirming what you desire or rehearsing what you fear? Because whatever you are saying to yourself in secret, you will soon be shouting from the rooftops of your life. Your private inner speech becomes your public outer experience. Your mental conversations harden into physical facts. Your internal dialogue creates your external dialogue. There is no separation between inner and outer. They are one reality, expressing itself at different levels of density. If you want to know what you are creating, listen to your inner speech. If you want to change what you are creating, change your inner speech. It is that simple and that profound. Match your inner conversations to your fulfilled desire. Speak to yourself as though you already are what you want to be. Affirm inwardly what you would affirm outwardly if your wish were already realized. This requires vigilance. This requires awareness, because most of your inner speech is habitual and unconscious. You've been conducting the same negative conversations with yourself for so long that you don't even notice them anymore. They run like background programs, constantly creating more of what you don't want. So you must wake up. You must become aware of your own inner talking. You must catch yourself in the act of negative creation and consciously redirect your speech toward the positive pole, toward the wish fulfilled, toward the state you desire to occupy. This is the discipline. This is the practice. This is how you master your mind and therefore master your world. Now let me speak about feeling, because this is where most people fail to understand the teaching. They think imagination is just mental pictures. They think assumption is just repeating words. But I tell you, feeling is the secret. Feeling is what makes imagination real. Feeling is what transforms assumption from concept to conviction. When I say feeling, I do not mean emotion. I do not mean sentimentality or getting worked up into an excited state. I mean the feeling of naturalness that comes when you truly accept something as true. It is the quiet sense of isness, the relief of already having what you want, the satisfaction of accomplished fact. Think about something you know to be true. You know your name. You know where you live. You know you are reading these words right now. There's a certain feeling that comes with that knowledge. It's not excitement. It's not hope. It's simple acceptance. It is. And that acceptance has a feeling tone to it, a sense of certainty, of naturalness, of course-ness. That is the feeling you must have about your desire. Not the emotion of wanting it, but the feeling of having it. Not the hope that it will come, but the naturalness of it already being here. When you can feel your desire the way you feel any accepted fact of your life, then you have truly assumed it. Then it must manifest. Because feeling is the secret that locks assumption into place. You can imagine all day long, but if you do not feel it real, nothing will happen. You can affirm 1,000 times, but if the feeling of conviction is absent, you are merely mouthing words. But when you imagine and feel simultaneously, when you assume and feel the naturalness of that assumption, you activate the creative power. You set the law in motion. You command reality to rearrange itself. This is why I emphasize thinking from the end rather than thinking of the end. When you think of your desire, you are separated from it. There is you here and the desired thing there. Subject and object. Distance. Gap. Lack. But when you think from your desire, when you feel yourself already in possession, there is no gap. There is fusion. There is union. You have become one with your aim. And that feeling of oneness, that sense of fusion with the wish fulfilled, is what the Bible calls faith. Not faith as belief in some external power, but faith as the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Faith as the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Substance and evidence are not out there waiting to be revealed. They are in here, in the feeling, in the assumption, in the consciousness that knows itself to be what it desires to be. Let me now give you the most practical technique I know for impressing your assumption upon the subconscious mind. It is the state akin to sleep, and it is your most powerful tool for transformation. Every night, as you prepare for sleep, you have a golden opportunity to plant the seeds of tomorrow's harvest. The state akin to sleep is that drowsy, relaxed condition between waking and sleeping. You are still conscious, still able to direct your attention, but your body is immobilized and your critical reasoning mind is quiet. In this state, the subconscious is most receptive. The doorway between conscious and subconscious is wide open. What you impress here goes deep, takes root, and must grow into objective expression. Here is what you do. Lie flat on your back with your head on the same level as your body. Relax completely. Induce a feeling of physical immobility, almost like you've had a dose of hemlock, as the poet Keats described it. A drowsy numbness where the body feels heavy, still, almost paralyzed, but you remain conscious and in control of where you place your attention. Now construct a scene in your imagination. This scene must be simple, short, easily repeatable, and it must imply that your wish is already fulfilled. Not a scene of you getting what you want, but a scene you would experience after you already have it. This is crucial. The scene must take place after the wish is fulfilled. For example, if you desire wealth, don't imagine receiving money. Imagine a friend congratulating you on your financial success. If you desire love, don't imagine meeting someone. Imagine lying in bed next to your beloved, feeling their warmth beside you. If you desire health, don't imagine healing. Imagine your doctor telling you that you're in perfect health. Or imagine yourself running effortlessly, breathing deeply, feeling strong. The scene must be first person. You are not watching yourself in the scene like a movie. You are in the scene, experiencing it through your own eyes, feeling it in your own body, and you loop this scene. You run it over and over, adding sensory details, feeling it more vividly each time until it becomes more real than the room you're lying in. As you loop the scene, you saturate yourself with the feeling of the wish fulfilled, not excitement about getting it, but the naturalness of having it, the relief, the satisfaction, the sense of it is done, and you carry this feeling into sleep. You drift off from the feeling of accomplishment, from the state of the wish fulfilled. The subconscious does not argue, it does not question, it does not distinguish between real and imagined. It simply accepts what you impress upon it in this receptive state and sets about making it objective. Night after night, as you fall asleep in the assumption of the wish fulfilled, you are literally commanding your subconscious to create the conditions that match your assumption. This is not visualization for the sake of feeling good. This is impression for the sake of manifestation. You are planting seeds in the most fertile soil of consciousness, and those seeds must grow. They must push through the soil of circumstance and appear as objective facts in your world. Do this every night. Make it a habit, not once in a while when you remember, not only when you're desperate, but every single night, because frequency is what matters, repetition is what impresses. Habitual occupancy of the state is what hardens assumption into fact. Now I know what you're thinking. What if I fall asleep before I finish the scene? Perfect. That's exactly what you want. You want to fall asleep from the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You want the last thought, the last feeling, the last impression to be the assumption of success. Because sleep is the door into heaven. What you take into sleep as a feeling, you bring out as a condition, action, or object in space, as in consciousness. so on earth. The state you occupy as you fall asleep is the state you will wake up in tomorrow. Not necessarily in objective form immediately, but in consciousness. And consciousness creates reality. So if you fall asleep wealthy in consciousness, you will begin to wake up wealthy in experience. The outer lag is simply the time it takes for three-dimensional reality to catch up with four-dimensional imagination. But here's the key. You cannot reserve your assumption only for bedtime. You must carry it with you throughout the day. After you have assumed the feeling of the wish fulfilled in your evening practice, do not close the experience as you would close a book. Let it remain in the atmosphere of your consciousness like a fragrant odor. Let it color your inner speech, your reactions, your expectations, your entire way of being. Practice living from the end throughout your waking hours. When doubt arises, and it will, return to your assumption. When circumstances contradict, and they will, return to your assumption. When people question, and they will, return to your assumption. You are not trying to convince the world. You are remaining faithful to your own consciousness. And in time, the world must conform. This is where persistence comes in. Assumption must be persisted in. You cannot assume health for one night and then spend the next day assuming sickness. You cannot assume wealth in your evening practice and then spend your days affirming poverty in your inner speech. You must be consistent. You must be faithful. You must persist until what you have assumed in imagination becomes what you experience in fact. The bridge of incidents will appear. This is the invisible chain of events that connects your assumption to its fulfillment. You do not need to know how it will happen. You do not need to figure out the path. You do not need to orchestrate the circumstances. Your job is simply to assume, to feel, to persist. The how takes care of itself. My brother sending me the steamship ticket was the bridge of incidents that manifested my assumption of being in Barbados. But I didn't know that bridge would appear. I didn't plan it. I didn't try to make it happen. I simply assumed I was in Barbados, persisted in that assumption, and the bridge appeared naturally, seemingly of its own accord. This is how it always works. Assume, feel, persist, and watch as the invisible bridge of incidents materializes, connecting your inner world to your outer experience. People will make seemingly random decisions that benefit you. Opportunities will arise that you never could have predicted. Circumstances will shift in ways that appear miraculous, but are simply the natural result of assumption creating reality. Now let me address something that stops most people from ever experiencing the power of this law. They assume for a little while, see no immediate results, and then go back to their old state. They live in the end for an evening, wake up the next morning, still experiencing lack, and immediately return to the consciousness of lack. They are like someone planting a seed, digging it up the next day to see if it's growing, then complaining that nothing is happening. You must give your assumption time to harden into fact. You must remain faithful to the invisible state, even when the visible world screams otherwise. This is the test. This is where most fail. Because it's easy to assume when things are going well. It's easy to feel fulfilled when evidence supports it. But can you assume in the face of contradiction? Can you feel wealthy when the bill collectors are calling? Can you feel loved when you're sleeping alone? Can you feel healthy when the symptoms persist? That is the real test of assumption. And passing that test is what separates those who manifest their desires from those who simply dream about them. The difference is not in the technique. The difference is in the persistence, in the faithfulness, in the absolute refusal to return to the old state, no matter what the outer world is showing you. Because here's the truth. The outer world is always showing you your old assumptions. What you see today was created by yesterday's consciousness. What you will see tomorrow is being created by today's consciousness. There is always a lag, always a gap between assumption and manifestation. And in that gap, you must remain faithful. Think of it like turning a ship. When you turn the wheel, the ship doesn't change direction instantly. There's a period where you've turned the wheel, but the ship is still moving in the old direction. If you panic in that moment and turn the wheel back, the ship never changes course. But if you hold the wheel steady, if you remain committed to the new direction, eventually the ship must turn. Your assumption is the wheel. The outer world is the ship. Turn the wheel by changing your assumption, then hold it steady by persisting in that assumption, and the ship of your life must turn. It is law. It cannot fail. It has never failed. It will never fail, because assumption creates reality. Not eventually, not sometimes, but always, inevitably, lawfully. Let me now speak about revision, because this is one of the most powerful techniques I've ever taught, and yet it's one of the most misunderstood. Revision is the art of rewriting the past in imagination. And yes, you can do this, because the past is not fixed. The past is not gone. The past exists in consciousness, and consciousness can be changed. If something unpleasant happened today, if you reacted poorly, if you said the wrong thing, if you experienced something you didn't want to experience, you can revise it. Tonight, before you sleep, replay the scene as you wish it had happened. Don't just think about it differently. Actually re-experience it in imagination, making it conform to your ideal. Did you have an argument with someone? Revise it. Replay the scene, but this time see and hear yourself responding with love and understanding. See the other person responding positively. Feel the harmony, the peace, the resolution. Make the revised scene so vivid that it feels more real than what actually happened. Why does this work? Because consciousness is the only reality. What happened in the three-dimensional world is simply your consciousness pushed out. By revising it in consciousness, you change the seed that created it. You prune the tree of causation, and future events, which would have grown from that negative seed, now cannot grow because the seed has been changed. I have seen this work miracles. People who revised illness saw health appear. People who revised poverty saw wealth materialize. People who revised broken relationships saw healing occur. Not because they changed the past in some magical sense, but because they changed consciousness. And changed consciousness creates changed circumstances. One woman wrote to me about revising an injury. She had severely injured her foot, and it was swollen and painful. That night, she practiced revision. She imagined the injury never happening. She saw and felt her foot as perfect, whole, healthy. She fell asleep from that revised state. The next morning, when she woke, the injury was completely gone. No swelling, no pain, no evidence that anything had ever happened. Was that a miracle? Only if you define miracle as something that violates natural law. But I tell you, consciousness creating reality is natural law. It is the only law. Everything else, physics, chemistry, biology, is subordinate to the law of consciousness. Change consciousness, and you change everything that flows from consciousness, including the body, including the past, including what appears to be fixed, solid, unchangeable fact. So, practice revision. Make it part of your evening routine. Before you enter into your wish-fulfilled scene, review the day. Notice anything that didn't conform to your ideal, and revise it. Rewrite it in imagination. Experience it as you wish it had been. Then, let it go and move into your main practice of assuming the wish fulfilled. This does two things. First, it prevents negative seeds from taking root and growing into negative future experiences. Second, it trains your imagination to be the master instead of the slave. You are no longer at the mercy of what happens. You are the one who determines what happens by determining what you accept in consciousness. Now let me speak directly about what most of you are dealing with right now. You have a desire. You know what you want. You've tried various methods, read various books, listened to various teachers. Some things worked temporarily. Most things didn't work at all. And now you're here, listening to me, hoping that maybe this time will be different. Maybe this teaching will be the one that finally transforms your life. I want to tell you something that might shock you. The teaching itself will not transform your life. The technique itself will not manifest your desire. The information itself will not set you free. What will transform your life is you, your willingness to assume, your faithfulness to the assumption, your persistence in the face of contradiction, your absolute commitment to remaining in the state of the wish fulfilled until it hardens into fact. I can give you the law. I can explain the principle. I can offer you techniques tested and proven over decades, but I cannot assume for you. I cannot feel for you. I cannot persist for you. You must do that yourself. And if you will do it, if you will actually apply what I'm teaching instead of just consuming it as interesting information, you will prove the law in your own experience. And that proof will be worth more than anything I could ever tell you. Start tonight. Don't wait until you understand everything perfectly. Don't wait until you feel ready. Don't wait until conditions are ideal. Start tonight with what you know. Lie down in your bed, relax your body, enter the drowsy state. Construct your scene, feel it real. Fall asleep in the assumption of the wish fulfilled. Do this every night for 30 days and see what happens. But more than the evening practice, change your inner speech. Starting right now, in this moment, become aware of what you're saying to yourself. And whenever you catch yourself affirming lack, limitation, fear, or unworthiness, stop. Redirect. Speak to yourself from the wish fulfilled. Affirm inwardly what you would affirm if your desire were already manifest. This is the discipline. This is the practice. This is how you become the master of your fate instead of a victim of circumstance. And yes, it requires effort. Yes, it requires vigilance. Yes, it requires persistence. But what doesn't? You're putting effort into your life right now. You're being vigilant about your problems right now. You're persistent in your worry and doubt right now. I'm simply asking you to redirect that energy toward assumption instead of toward fear, toward the wish fulfilled instead of toward the wish denied. Let me tell you what will happen when you do this. At first, nothing will seem to change. The outer world will look the same. People will treat you the same. Circumstances will appear unchanged. And this is when most people quit. They assume for a few days, see no visible results, and conclude that it doesn't work. They return to their old state of consciousness, and therefore return to their old state of experience. But if you persist, if you remain faithful to your assumption, even when there's no visible evidence, something begins to shift. You'll notice it first in yourself. You'll feel different, lighter, more confident, more at peace. This is the inner change preceding the outer change. This is consciousness reorganizing itself around your new assumption. Then you'll start to notice small things. A comment someone makes that aligns with your assumption, an opportunity that appears out of nowhere, a door that opens when you weren't even looking for it. These are the first fruits. These are signs that the bridge of incidents is forming. Don't get excited and abandon your assumption in celebration. Don't doubt and dismiss them as coincidence. Simply notice them, accept them as confirmations that the law is working, and continue in your assumption, because the small things are just the beginning. The small changes prove that the big changes are on the way. And then one day, sometimes suddenly, sometimes gradually, the major manifestation appears. The thing you've been assuming, the wish you've been living in, materializes in your objective world. It might come exactly as you imagined it. It might come in a form slightly different but equally satisfying. But it will come, because assumption, persisted in, must harden into fact. When it does come, don't fall into the trap of thinking you got lucky or that the universe finally decided to give you what you want. Know with certainty that you created this through your own assumption. You selected this state from the infinite possibilities. You occupied it in consciousness. You persisted in it despite contradiction. And the law did what the law always does. It manifested your assumption in your experience. This proof, this knowing that you created your reality through assumption is worth more than the manifestation itself. Because once you know this, once you prove it to yourself, you can never unknow it. You become free, free from the tyranny of circumstance, free from the belief in a power outside yourself, free from the need to beg, to hope, to wait for someone or something to give you permission to be what you desire to be. You realize that you are the operant power. You are God in action. Your consciousness is the creator of your world. And there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that is impossible to you when you assume it in consciousness and persist in that assumption. Now let me speak about something that many of you struggle with. What do you do when your desire involves another person? Can you manifest a specific person? Can you change someone's will? Can you influence another's consciousness? And is it right to do so? Here's what I know. Everyone is you pushed out. This is not poetry. This is metaphysical fact. There is only one consciousness. Your consciousness. What you call other people are simply aspects of your own consciousness, appearing as seemingly separate beings. They have no independent existence apart from your awareness of them. They are you, pushed out and objectified. When you change your assumption about someone, they must change. Because they have no choice. They are not separate from you. They are your consciousness appearing as them. When you assume someone loves you, they must love you. When you assume someone is helpful, they must be helpful. When you assume someone treats you well, they must treat you well. Because they are reflecting your assumption about them. But here's where people get confused. They try to change the person out there. They try to convince, persuade, manipulate, control, and it never works. Because the person out there is just a reflection. You cannot change a reflection by acting on the reflection. You must change what is being reflected. You must change your assumption. Assume the best about people, and they will be their best toward you. Assume they love you, and they will show you love. Assume they are helpful, and they will help you. It is law. It cannot fail. Because there is only one consciousness, and that consciousness is yours, and what you assume about anyone becomes their nature as far as you are concerned. Is this manipulation? No. Because you are not changing them. You are changing your assumption about them, and since they exist in your consciousness, when your consciousness of them changes, your experience of them changes. They don't lose their free will. You simply shift into the version of them that matches your assumption. Think of it like tuning a radio. There are countless stations broadcasting simultaneously. You don't create the station by tuning to it. You simply select which station you will hear. In the same way, there are infinite versions of every person, every situation, every circumstance. You don't create these versions. You select which version you will experience by selecting which assumption you will hold. So, if you desire a specific person, don't try to change them out there. Change your consciousness of them in here. Assume they love you. Assume they desire you. Assume they are yours. Feel it. Live in it. Persist in it. And the version of them that matches your assumption must appear in your experience. Not because you controlled them, but because you selected the state in which that version of them exists. Now let me address those of you who are dealing with illness, with physical conditions that seem impossible to change. Can the body be healed through assumption? Can disease be reversed through imagination? I tell you, yes. Absolutely yes. Because the body is consciousness objectified. Every cell, every organ, every system is your consciousness pushed out and made flesh. When you assume health, when you feel yourself to be whole and perfect, when you occupy the consciousness of vitality and well-being, the body must conform. It has no choice. Because consciousness creates form. Consciousness creates matter. Consciousness is senior to every physical law, every medical diagnosis, every prognosis. I have seen people heal themselves of conditions doctors called incurable. I have seen tumors dissolve. I have seen chronic pain disappear. I have seen diseases reverse. Not through medicine, though medicine can be part of the bridge of incidents, but through assumption, through occupying the consciousness of health so completely that the body had to reorganize itself to match. The woman who revised her foot injury, the mother who assumed her dying child's health. These are not anomalies, they are demonstrations of the law. And you can demonstrate it too if you will stop believing in the fixed nature of matter and start believing in the creative power of consciousness. Assume health, feel yourself whole, live in the end of perfect vitality, and let the body catch up to your assumption. It will, not because I say so, but because consciousness creates reality, and the body is reality. Let me also speak to those of you dealing with financial lack. Money seems so concrete, so tied to external conditions, so dependent on factors outside your control. How can imagination create money? How can assumption manifest wealth? The same way it manifests anything else. Money is consciousness. Wealth is consciousness. Poverty is consciousness. They are not things out there. They are states of consciousness expressing themselves. Change the state and you change the expression. If you want wealth, stop assuming poverty. Stop affirming lack. Stop speaking about not having enough. Every time you say, I can't afford it, I don't have enough, I'm broke, money is tight, you are assuming poverty and poverty must manifest. You are commanding your subconscious to create conditions that match your assumption. Instead, assume wealth. Not someday wealth, not I will be wealthy, but I am wealthy. Now, present tense. Feel yourself to be financially free. Imagine what you would do, how you would feel, what you would think if you had abundant wealth right now, and occupy that state. Live in it. Think from it. Speak from it. Act from it. The money will come. It might come through a raise. It might come through an unexpected gift. It might come through an opportunity. It might come through a way you never could have predicted. But it will come, because assumption creates reality, and if you assume wealth, wealth must manifest. But you must be consistent. You cannot assume wealth in your evening practice and then spend all day assuming poverty. You cannot feel rich for 5 minutes and then feel poor for 23 hours and 55 minutes. The assumption that dominates your consciousness is the assumption that creates your reality. So make wealth your dominant assumption. Let it permeate your inner speech. Let it color your expectations. Let it shape your decisions. Not from desperation or greed, but from the naturalness of someone who is wealthy and knows themselves to be wealthy. That is the consciousness that creates wealth. Now, I want to address something that is crucial. What do you do when your desire seems to contradict someone else's good? What if your assumption appears to hurt another? What if manifesting your desire means someone else doesn't get what they want? Remember, there is only one consciousness. What you call other people are aspects of your consciousness. When you assume the best for yourself, you are assuming the best, period. The one consciousness that is all of us benefits from your good. You cannot harm another by assuming your own good. You can only harm another by assuming harm. If you want a specific job and someone else wants the same job, assume you have it. Don't assume the other person loses. Simply assume you have it. The bridge of incidents that appears might include that person getting an even better opportunity that they prefer. You don't know. You can't know. Your job is to assume your wish fulfilled and let consciousness work out the details. The same applies to relationships, to competitions, to any situation where it seems like only one person can win. Assume you win, and trust that the one consciousness will orchestrate events in a way that benefits all. Because when you are assuming from love, from wholeness, from the wish fulfilled, you are literally raising the consciousness of the whole. Your good radiates. Your fulfilled state lifts everyone in your sphere. By becoming what you desire to be, you give permission for others to become what they desire to be. You are not taking from anyone. You are adding to the sum total of manifestation. So never feel guilty for assuming you're good. Never think you're being selfish for desiring your wish fulfilled. You are not separate from the whole. Your consciousness is the consciousness. What benefits you benefits all. Assume boldly. Assume completely. Assume without reservation or apology. You are God individualized, and God's nature is to create, to express, to fulfill desire. Let me now speak about timing. When will it manifest? How long does it take? Why hasn't it appeared yet? These are the questions that plague those who are trying to apply this teaching, and the answer might frustrate you. I don't know when it will manifest for you. I can't give you a timeline. I can't promise 3 days or 3 weeks or 3 months. What I can tell you is this: it has already manifested in consciousness the moment you assumed it. In the fourth dimension, in imagination, it is done, completed, accomplished. What you're waiting for is the third dimension to catch up. You're waiting for time to deliver what consciousness has already created. And how long that takes depends on many factors. The intensity of your assumption, the persistence of your faithfulness, the depth of your conviction, the absence of counter-assumptions, the complexity of the bridge of incidents, the readiness of conditions to rearrange themselves. Some things manifest quickly, within days or even hours. Some things take months. Some things take years. But here's what you must understand. The time between assumption and manifestation is not empty time. It is incubation time. It is the time when the invisible seed is growing in the dark soil of consciousness, preparing to break through into visibility. If you dig up the seed to check if it's growing, you kill it. If you abandon your assumption because you don't see results fast enough, you stop the process. But if you remain faithful, if you water the seed with daily assumption, if you protect it from the weeds of doubt and fear, it will grow. It must grow. It cannot not grow. Because assumption persisted, it must harden into fact. So stop asking when. Stop checking for signs. Stop testing to see if it's working. Just assume, persist, be faithful, and let the law work in its own perfect timing. Your job is not to determine when. Your job is to determine what. What do you assume? And do you persist in it? The when takes care of itself. Let me now share with you some of the most profound experiences and teachings that will deepen your understanding of what I've been revealing to you. Because the principle is simple, but the depth of it is infinite. The more you explore consciousness, the more you will discover its creative power, its limitless nature, its absolute authority over what you call the objective world. I want to tell you about a woman who proved this law in the most dramatic way. She was married to an alcoholic. For years, she suffered. He would drink, become violent, lose jobs, destroy their finances, terrorize their children. She tried everything. She begged him to stop. She threatened to leave. She sought help from counselors, from doctors, from priests. Nothing worked. The pattern continued year after year, and she felt helpless, trapped, victimized by his addiction. Then she learned what I'm teaching you. And she made a decision that changed everything. She stopped trying to change him out there. She stopped focusing on his drinking, his behavior, his problems. Instead, she changed her assumption about him. Every night, as she fell asleep, she imagined him sober, responsible, loving, successful. She saw him coming home from work, clear-headed and happy. She heard him speaking kindly to the children. She felt his gentle kiss on her forehead. She assumed, in consciousness, that he was the man she wanted him to be, and she persisted in this assumption despite daily evidence to the contrary. When he came home drunk, she didn't react from the reality of what she saw. She held to the reality of what she had assumed. When he was violent, she revised the scene in her imagination. When he lost another job, she imagined him successful in his work. Day after day, night after night, she lived in the end of the marriage she desired, not the marriage she was experiencing. Within 3 months, he stopped drinking. Not gradually, not through rehab, not through meetings or medication. He simply stopped, and he never touched alcohol again. He became the husband she had assumed him to be. Kind, responsible, successful, loving. Their marriage was transformed. Their family was healed. And it all happened because she changed her consciousness of him. Now, some would say he changed himself. Some would say he found willpower. Some would say it was a miracle. But she knew the truth. She changed him by changing her assumption about him. Because he existed in her consciousness. And when her consciousness of him changed, he had to change. He was you pushed out, her you. And when she changed what she pushed out, the reflection changed. This is not theory. This is not wishful thinking. This is law. And you can use it the same way she did. Whatever you desire to change in another person, assume the change. Don't try to force it. Don't try to convince them. Don't even speak to them about it. Just assume they already are what you want them to be, and persist in that assumption until it manifests. Now let me speak about something that will challenge your entire understanding of causation. You believe that outer events cause inner states. You think you're sad because something bad happened. You think you're anxious because circumstances are uncertain. You think you're angry because someone wronged you. But I tell you, it's the reverse. Inner states cause outer events. You are not sad because something bad happened. Something bad happened because you were in a sad state. You are not anxious because circumstances are uncertain. Circumstances became uncertain because you were in an anxious state. You are not angry because someone wronged you. Someone wronged you because you were in an angry state. The outer world is always the result of the inner world, never the cause of it. This is a complete reversal of how most people think. They believe they must change circumstances in order to change their state. But the truth is, they must change their state in order to change their circumstances. Think about it. If the outer world caused your state, you would have no control. You would be completely at the mercy of events, people, conditions beyond your control. But if your state causes your outer world, then you have complete control, because you can always choose your state, you can always change your assumption, you can always occupy a different consciousness. This is why trying to change circumstances is futile. This is why manipulating people doesn't work. This is why controlling your environment fails, because you're addressing effects while ignoring cause. You're trying to rearrange the shadows while the light source remains unchanged. Change the light source. Change your state. Change your consciousness. And all the shadows must rearrange themselves automatically. You don't have to move each shadow individually. You just have to move the light, and all the shadows move with it. Your state of consciousness is the light. Your circumstances are the shadows. Move the light by changing your state, and watch how effortlessly the shadows rearrange themselves. Let me give you a vivid example. I once knew a man who was constantly having conflicts at work. Different jobs, different bosses, different co-workers, but the same pattern: conflict, arguments, tension. He would get fired or quit, find a new job, and within months, the same pattern would emerge. He kept blaming the people. This boss is unreasonable. That co-worker is jealous. This company has a toxic culture. He saw himself as the victim of other people's behavior. He never once considered that he might be creating the pattern through his own consciousness. Then someone introduced him to this teaching, and he began to examine his inner state. What was his dominant assumption about work? What did he say to himself about bosses, about co-workers, about his place in the workplace? And he discovered that his inner speech was full of defensiveness, suspicion, and fear of being mistreated. He assumed conflict, he expected problems, he anticipated being wronged, and because assumption creates reality, that's exactly what he experienced. The people at work weren't causing his problems. His assumption was causing his problems, and the people at work were simply reflecting that assumption back to him. So he changed his assumption. He began to assume that he worked in harmony with everyone. He imagined friendly conversations with his boss. He saw his co-workers as supportive and kind. He felt himself valued, respected, appreciated, and he persisted in this new assumption despite the current reality of tension and conflict. Within weeks, the atmosphere at work began to shift. The boss who had been critical became encouraging. The co-workers who had been distant became friendly. The environment that had felt toxic became supportive. Nothing changed out there except everything changed out there. Because the inner change created the outer change. He still works at that same company today, years later, in perfect harmony with everyone. Not because they changed, but because he changed his consciousness of them. And when his consciousness changed, they had to reflect the new assumption. This is the power you have. This is the control you possess. You are not a victim of other people's behavior. You are the creator of your experience of other people. Assume they are kind, and they will be kind. Assume they are helpful, and they will help. Assume they love you, and they will show you love. Everyone is you pushed out. Change what you push out by changing your assumption, and everyone must change accordingly. Now let me address something that troubles many people when they first encounter this teaching. If I create my reality through assumption, does that mean I created all the bad things that happened to me? Does that mean I'm to blame for my suffering? Does that mean nothing is real except what I make real? First, understand that this teaching is not about blame. It's about power. Yes, your consciousness has been creating your reality all along. But most of that creation has been unconscious, automatic, habitual. You weren't consciously choosing to suffer. You were unconsciously assuming patterns that created suffering. But now that you know, now that you understand the law, you can create consciously. You can choose your assumptions deliberately. You can select which state you will occupy intentionally. This is not about guilt for the past. This is about power for the future. Second, yes, in the deepest sense, nothing is real except consciousness. The whole vast world is nothing but your own wonderful human imagination pushed out. But this doesn't mean the world is an illusion in the sense that it doesn't matter. It means the world is imagination made visible. It is consciousness objectified. It is real, but it's not independent. It's not happening to you, it's happening from you. And third, this teaching frees you from victimhood. As long as you believe the outer world is causing your inner state, you are powerless. You are at the mercy of circumstances. You are waiting for conditions to change before you can be happy. But when you realize that your inner state creates your outer world, you become powerful. You become the creator, you become free. Let me tell you about a profound mystical experience I had that revealed to me the nature of time and causation in a way that forever changed my understanding. I found myself in a vision, standing in a vast hall, filled with what appeared to be sculptures. But these were not ordinary sculptures. They were living scenes, frozen in time. Every possible human drama, every conceivable situation, every imaginable circumstance existed in that hall as a completed, perfected, finished state. And I understood in that moment what Blake meant when he said all possible states exist as sculptures in Los's halls. Creation is finished. Not creation is ongoing. Not creation is yet to come. But creation is finished. Everything that could ever be already is. Every version of every life already exists in perfection. What we call manifestation is not creation. It is selection. You are not creating new realities. You are selecting which already existing reality you will experience, and you select by assuming, by entering the state, by occupying the consciousness that corresponds to the desired reality. This is why affirmations often fail, because you're trying to create something new through repetition, but you're not creating anything new. You're selecting something that already exists. And you select it not by saying words, but by assuming the state, by feeling yourself to be in it, by occupying it in consciousness. The life you want already exists. The relationship you desire already exists. The health you seek already exists. The wealth you need already exists. Not as potential, not as possibility, but as present, completed, perfected fact in the realm of imagination, which is the only realm that truly exists. Your job is not to create it. Your job is to assume it, to enter it, to occupy it, to live in it. And when you do, the three-dimensional world, which is simply a delayed reflection of the four-dimensional reality, must conform and show you in objective form what you have assumed in subjective consciousness. Time itself is not what you think it is. Past, present, and future do not exist in sequence. They exist simultaneously in the eternal now. What you call the past is simply states you occupied previously. What you call the future is simply states you have not yet occupied. But all states exist now. When you change your assumption, you don't change the future. You change which future you will experience. You shift from one timeline to another. You move from one parallel reality to another. And you do this instantaneously in consciousness, though it appears to take time in the three-dimensional world. This is why you can revise the past. Because the past is not gone, it exists as a state, and you can enter a different past state, a revised past state, and make that your reality. When you do, the present changes because the present is built upon the past. Change the past in consciousness, and you change the present that flows from it. This is profound. This is mystical. This is the secret of secrets. Time is not linear. Causation is not sequential. Reality is not fixed. Everything is fluid, malleable, changeable through the power of assumption, through the authority of consciousness, through the creative force of imagination. Now let me speak very practically about the most common obstacle people face when trying to apply this law. Doubt. The mind that doubts, the intellect that questions, the rational faculty that demands proof before believing. How do you overcome doubt? How do you maintain faith in the unseen? The answer is not to fight doubt. The answer is to replace doubt with assumption. Doubt is itself an assumption. When you doubt, you are assuming that your desire cannot be fulfilled. You are assuming that the law doesn't work. You are assuming that you are the exception, and that assumption, like all assumptions, creates reality. So don't try to stop doubting. Simply assume the opposite. Assume your desire is fulfilled. Assume the law works. Assume you are not the exception. And persist in that assumption even when doubt arises. Because doubt will arise. The rational mind will question. The senses will contradict. other people will challenge. But none of that matters. What matters is which assumption you persist in. Do you persist in the assumption of doubt, or do you persist in the assumption of fulfillment? Most people entertain their doubts and starve their assumptions. They think about all the reasons it won't work for hours, and they assume the wish fulfilled for minutes. And then they wonder why nothing changes. You must reverse this. Starve the doubt. Refuse to entertain it. Every time it arises, redirect your attention to the assumption of the wish fulfilled. Make this your practice. When doubt says it's impossible, assumption says it is done. When doubt says you're not worthy, assumption says I am. When doubt says it's taking too long, assumption says it is here now. Train yourself to instantly replace every doubtful thought with an assumptive thought. This is mental discipline. This is consciousness control. This is how you become the master of your mind instead of its slave. And as you practice this, you will find that doubt arises less frequently and assumption becomes more natural. Eventually, assumption becomes your default state, your habitual consciousness, your permanent residence. Let me also address the question of worthiness. So many people believe they cannot have what they desire because they are not worthy. They feel guilty about past mistakes. They judge themselves as undeserving. They think they need to earn the right to be happy, healthy, wealthy, loved. But I tell you, worthiness is not a prerequisite for manifestation. Consciousness is. You do not need to become worthy. You need to become conscious of being what you desire to be. And the moment you become conscious of it, you are it. Not because you earned it, not because you deserved it, but because consciousness creates reality. God does not judge worthiness. Consciousness does not measure deservingness. The law does not evaluate morality. Consciousness simply creates whatever you assume. Assume yourself worthy, and you are worthy. Assume yourself deserving, and you deserve. Assume yourself blessed, and you are blessed. This is not about ignoring genuine growth or avoiding responsibility. This is about understanding that you are already complete. You are already the I am. You are already God individualized. There is nothing you need to become. There is only something you need to assume. If you have hurt others, make amends not because you need to become worthy, but because living in harmony with your ideal creates peace in consciousness. If you have made mistakes, learn from them not because you need to prove yourself, but because growth is natural to consciousness. But never let the past convince you that you cannot have what you desire now. Now is the only time that exists, and in now, you are whoever you assume yourself to be. The past is gone. It only exists as memory, and memory can be revised. The future is not yet here. It only exists as assumption, and assumption can be changed. Now is where your power is. Now is when you can assume. Now is when you can enter the state. Stop waiting to become worthy. You are worthy now. Stop waiting to deserve it. You deserve it now. Stop waiting for the right time. The right time is now. Assume now. Feel now. Enter the state now, and let the past and future take care of themselves. Let me tell you about perhaps the most important practice you can develop. The practice of living in the Sabbath. The Bible speaks of the Sabbath as a day of rest, but mystically, the Sabbath is not a day, it is a state. It is the state of rest in the wish fulfilled. It is the consciousness of it is done. Most people live in the state of working toward their desire. They are always striving, always trying, always working to make it happen. And that state of working toward implies separation from the goal. It confesses that you don't have it yet. It keeps you in the consciousness of lack. But the Sabbath is the state of rest. It is the consciousness of work complete. It is the feeling of mission accomplished. It is the assumption of the wish already fulfilled. When you enter the Sabbath, you stop working. Not physically, but mentally. You stop trying to make it happen. You stop figuring out how. You stop worrying about when. You simply rest in the knowledge that it is done. This is perhaps the hardest state to occupy because it contradicts everything you've been taught. You've been taught that you must work for what you want. You must earn it. You must make it happen through effort and struggle. But I tell you, all the work that matters happens in consciousness. And the work in consciousness is simply assumption. Assume the wish fulfilled, and the work is done. Then you rest. You live in the Sabbath. You walk in the confidence of one who knows the outcome is assured. Not because you're going to make it happen, but because it is already done in consciousness, and consciousness creates reality. This doesn't mean you become passive or inactive in the outer world. It means your actions flow from the state of the wish fulfilled rather than from the state of trying to make it happen. You act as one who already has, not as one who is trying to get. You speak as one who already is, not as one who is trying to become. This shift in consciousness, this movement from working toward to resting in, is the difference between effort and effortlessness, between struggle and flow, between trying and allowing. Enter the Sabbath. Rest in the wish fulfilled, and watch how the outer world rearranges itself with an ease that seems miraculous but is simply the natural result of consciousness creating reality. Now, let me share something that will help you understand why some assumptions manifest quickly while others seem to take longer. It has to do with the naturalness of the assumption. The more natural it feels, the faster it manifests. The more forced or artificial it feels, the longer the bridge of incidence. If you assume something that feels completely natural to you, that matches your sense of self, that fits with your identity, it manifests quickly. Because there's no inner resistance, no contradiction between the assumption and your self-concept. The assumption and the self are aligned, and manifestation flows easily. But if you assume something that feels unnatural, that contradicts your self-concept, that requires a big leap from where you currently are, there's inner resistance. Part of you is assuming the wish fulfilled, but part of you is assuming the opposite. And these conflicting assumptions create confusion in consciousness, which delays manifestation. This is why I often teach people to assume states that imply the desired end rather than assuming the end itself. If assuming wealth feels too unnatural, assume confidence. If assuming perfect health feels too big a leap, assume vitality. If assuming a specific person's love feels forced, assume lovableness. Find an assumption that feels natural to you, that doesn't create inner resistance, that aligns with your sense of self. Live in that state, make it habitual, make it your dominant consciousness. And from that state, the desired end will flow naturally, easily, effortlessly. As your self-concept expands, as you become comfortable with bigger and bigger assumptions, you can assume more directly. But if you're struggling with an assumption, if it feels forced or unnatural, find a stepping stone assumption that feels more comfortable. Use that to bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Remember, the goal is not to affirm something you don't believe. The goal is to assume something until you do believe it, until it feels natural, until it becomes your identity. And when that happens, manifestation is instantaneous because there's no gap between consciousness and experience. Let me now address those of you who have been practicing this teaching but feel like you're not making progress. You're doing your nightly sats. You're monitoring your inner speech. You're assuming the wish fulfilled, but the outer world seems unchanged. The circumstances persist. The evidence contradicts. And you're starting to wonder if it really works. First, understand that there is always a lag between assumption in consciousness and manifestation in experience. You are not seeing no results. you are seeing delayed results. What you see today was created by yesterday's consciousness, perhaps even last week's or last month's consciousness. What you are creating now with your new assumption will show up soon, but it needs time to materialize. Second, examine your assumption honestly. Are you really persisting in it? Or are you assuming for 10 minutes and doubting for 23 hours and 50 minutes? Because the assumption that dominates your consciousness is the assumption that creates your reality. If doubt is your dominant state, doubt will manifest. If fear is your dominant state, fear will manifest. But if the wish fulfilled is your dominant state, the wish fulfilled will manifest. Third, look for the small signs. Manifestation rarely happens all at once. It usually begins with little things. A comment someone makes, a thought that comes to you, an opportunity that appears. These are the first fruits. They are evidence that the assumption is taking hold, that the bridge of incidence is forming, that the manifestation is on its way. Don't dismiss the small signs. Don't wait for the big manifestation before you believe. The small signs are proof that it's working. They are confirmation that you're on the right track. Accept them with gratitude. They will lead to bigger signs, which will lead to the full manifestation. And fourth, check your resistance. Is there a part of you that doesn't really want what you're assuming? Is there a hidden fear that if you get it, something bad will happen? Is there a secret belief that you don't deserve it? These unconscious counter-assumptions can block manifestation even when you're consciously assuming the wish fulfilled. Bring these resistances into the light. Examine them, question them, and then revise them. Assume that having your desire is safe, good, natural, and right for you. Assume that you deserve it fully. Assume that getting it will make your life better in every way. Clear the unconscious blocks by consciously assuming the opposite. Let me tell you something that might shock you. Sometimes what you think you want is not really what you want. Sometimes you're assuming a specific form when what you actually desire is a specific feeling. And when you're too attached to the form, you block the feeling from manifesting in whatever form would be most natural. For example, you might assume a specific person must love you, but what you really want is to feel loved, cherished, desired. And if you're so fixated on that specific person that you refuse to feel loved unless it comes through them, you create resistance. You limit consciousness. You tell the universe that there's only one acceptable bridge of incidence. But if you assume the feeling, if you occupy the state of being loved, cherished, desired, without demanding that it come through a specific channel, then consciousness is free to deliver it in the most natural, easy, perfect way. It might come through that person. It might come through someone even better. It might come through multiple people. But it will come because you assume the state without limiting how it could be expressed. This is important. Don't confuse the form with the essence. Don't mistake the symbol for the reality. What you really want is never a thing or a person. What you really want is a state of consciousness. The thing or person is just the symbol of that state. If you assume the state, the appropriate symbol must appear. But if you demand a specific symbol, you might block the state from expressing itself. So examine your desires. What state do they represent? What feeling are you really after? Assume that state. Occupy that feeling. Live in that consciousness. And let the form take care of itself. Let consciousness choose the best possible way to express your assumption in objective form. Now let me speak about faith and how it differs from hope. Most people think faith and hope are the same thing, but they are not. Hope looks to the future. Hope says someday it will come. Hope admits that it's not here yet. Hope is the consciousness of waiting, of lacking, of desiring without having. But faith is different. Faith is the consciousness of already having. Faith is the assumption of the wish fulfilled now. Faith is the feeling of it being done. Faith doesn't wait for the future. Faith lives in the eternal present where all things are now. The Bible says faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Notice it doesn't say faith hopes for substance. It says faith is the substance. The substance is not out there waiting to materialize. The substance is in here, in consciousness, in the feeling, in the assumption. When you have true faith, you're not believing that it will come. You're knowing that it is. You're not hoping for manifestation. You're experiencing the fulfillment in consciousness and simply waiting for the three-dimensional world to catch up and show you what you already have in imagination. This is the faith that moves mountains. This is the faith that makes all things possible. This is the faith that never fails. Not because it's belief in an external power, but because it's the assumption of the wish already fulfilled. An assumption creates reality. So stop hoping and start having faith. Stop waiting for the future and start living in the end. Stop desiring and start assuming. The shift from hope to faith is the shift from consciousness of lack to consciousness of fulfillment. And only the consciousness of fulfillment can manifest fulfillment. Now, as we come toward the end of our time together, I want to leave you with something practical, something you can start doing tonight, something that will prove the law to you in your own experience if you will actually do it. But before I give you that final practice, let me tell you one more story that illustrates the power of persistence and faith. There was a man who desired to be a successful writer. He had been writing for years, sending manuscripts to publishers, receiving rejection after rejection. He was discouraged, ready to give up, convinced that he simply didn't have what it takes. Then he encountered this teaching, and he decided to apply it. Every night, he would lie in bed and imagine a scene that implied success. He didn't imagine writing the perfect book. He didn't imagine the process of getting published. He imagined the end result. He saw himself holding his published book in his hands. He felt the weight of it. He smelled the pages. He ran his fingers over his name on the cover. He heard congratulations from friends and family. He felt the satisfaction of accomplished authorship. And he did this every single night for over a year. Night after night, month after month, he fell asleep holding that imaginary book, feeling that accomplished feeling, living in the end of being a successful published author. During that year, he continued to receive rejections. Publishers told him his work wasn't marketable. Agents said they couldn't sell it. Friends suggested he get a real job. Everything in his outer world contradicted his inner assumption. But he persisted. He didn't let the outer world shake his inner conviction. He knew that what he was assuming in consciousness must eventually manifest in experience. He understood the law. He trusted the process. He remained faithful to his nightly practice and his daily assumption. And then one day, seemingly out of nowhere, everything shifted. An editor who had previously rejected him called to say they wanted to reconsider. A literary agent reached out, having heard about his work through an unusual chain of connections. Within 3 months, he had a publishing contract, an advance, and a publication date. Within a year, his book was on the bestseller list. Did the outer world suddenly decide to give him what he wanted? No. The outer world finally caught up with what he had been assuming all along. The bridge of incidents formed. The law manifested his assumption. Success didn't come to him. He grew into the consciousness of success, and success expressed itself through him. This is what I mean by persistence. Not desperate clinging, not anxious forcing, but steady, faithful assumption of the wish fulfilled day after day, night after night. Regardless of what the outer world is showing you, this is how you prove the law. This is how you transform your life. Now let me speak about something profound, the relationship between assumption and attention. Where you place your attention determines what grows in your consciousness. And what grows in your consciousness determines what manifests in your experience. Most people place their attention on what they don't want. They focus on the problem, the lack, the obstacle, the fear, and because attention feeds assumption, and assumption creates reality, they create more of what they don't want. They water the weeds and wonder why the garden is overrun. But you must become disciplined in your attention. You must consciously direct it toward the wish fulfilled. When your attention wanders toward the problem, redirect it toward the solution. When it focuses on what's missing, shift it to what you're assuming is present. When it dwells on fear, move it to faith. This is the practice of guarding your attention. Your attention is precious. It is creative. Where it goes, energy flows. And where energy flows, reality grows. So be vigilant. Notice where your attention is going throughout the day. And whenever you catch it feeding the wrong assumption, gently but firmly redirect it toward the wish fulfilled. This becomes easier with practice. At first, you'll find your attention wandering constantly toward the old patterns. But as you persist in redirecting it, it begins to naturally flow toward the new assumption. Eventually, the wish fulfilled becomes your default focus, your habitual state, your permanent consciousness. And when that happens, manifestation becomes effortless. You're no longer fighting against contradictory assumptions. You're no longer divided in consciousness. You're unified, focused, aligned with the wish fulfilled. And from that unified state, reality has no choice but to manifest in perfect accord with your assumption. Let me also address the question of multiple desires. Can you assume more than one thing at a time? Can you work on multiple manifestations simultaneously? The answer is yes, but with wisdom. If you try to assume 10 different things that are completely unrelated and that require focused attention on each one individually, you'll scatter your energy, you'll dilute your power, you'll be trying to serve too many masters. But if you assume a state of being that naturally includes multiple fulfillments, you can manifest many things at once. For example, instead of assuming I have this specific car, and I have this specific house, and I have this specific relationship, and I have this specific amount of money, you could simply assume I am abundant, I am blessed, I am successful, I am loved. These state assumptions encompass multiple specific manifestations. When you assume abundance, all the specific forms of abundance can flow naturally. When you assume success, various expressions of success can manifest. When you assume being loved, love can appear in multiple relationships and circumstances. So focus on assuming states rather than things. Assume identities rather than possessions. Assume consciousness rather than conditions. And from those broad assumptions, specific manifestations will flow naturally and abundantly. That said, if there's one specific desire that is particularly important to you, it's perfectly fine to give it focused attention. Create your scene around it. Fall asleep in the feeling of that specific wish fulfilled. Make it your primary assumption. The key is to not be conflicted, not to assume contradictory states, not to divide your consciousness. Let me now share something about the power of gratitude in this teaching. Gratitude is not just a nice feeling, it is the consciousness of having. When you feel grateful for something, you are assuming you have it. You cannot be genuinely grateful for something you believe you lack. This is why gratitude is such a powerful manifesting tool. Not because it attracts things to you from outside, but because it shifts you into the consciousness of having, and the consciousness of having creates the experience of having. Practice feeling grateful for your desire as though you already have it. Don't say, "I'll be grateful when it comes." Be grateful now. Feel the appreciation now. Experience the thankfulness now. This puts you in the state of the wish fulfilled, and the state manifests. Some people find it helpful to write gratitude lists that assume the wish fulfilled. Not "I'm grateful for the money I hope to receive," but "I'm grateful for the abundant money that flows to me effortlessly." Not "I'm grateful that I might meet someone someday," but "I'm grateful for my beloved who loves me deeply." Write as though it's already done. Feel as though it's already done. Be grateful as though it's already done. Because in consciousness, where the only reality exists, it is already done. Now let me address something that confuses many people. The relationship between doing and being. Should you take action toward your goal, or should you just assume and wait for it to manifest? The answer is neither extreme. You don't force action from the consciousness of lack, trying to make something happen that you believe hasn't happened yet. But you also don't become passive and inactive, refusing to respond to opportunities that arise naturally. The key is to act from the state of the wish fulfilled, not toward it. When you truly assume something is done, natural actions arise that align with that assumption. These actions don't feel like work or effort, they feel like natural expression of who you are. For example, if you assume yourself to be a successful entrepreneur, you won't sit on your couch waiting for success to knock on your door. You'll naturally be drawn to take actions that successful entrepreneurs take. But these actions will flow from the state of being a successful entrepreneur, not from trying to become one. See the difference? One is pulling action. The other is doing pushing toward. One is expression. The other is effort. One is natural, the other is forced. Always act from the state of being what you desire to be, and your actions will be effective, effortless, and aligned with manifestation. Listen to your inner guidance. When you're truly in the state of the wish fulfilled, you'll feel inspired to take certain actions. These inspired actions are part of the bridge of incidents. They're how consciousness translates your assumption into objective form. Take them joyfully, naturally, without strain or doubt. But if you find yourself taking frantic action from a place of fear or desperation, stop. Return to your assumption. Re-enter the state. Feel the wish fulfilled again. And then notice what actions arise from that centered, confident state. Those are the right actions. Let me now speak about a practice that can accelerate your manifestation and deepen your faith. The practice of living in the Sabbath, which I mentioned earlier, can be enhanced by what I call deliberate acts from the end. These are small, symbolic actions you take that assume your desire is already fulfilled. For instance, if you're assuming abundance, you might leave a generous tip when the old you would have left little or nothing. If you're assuming confidence, you might speak up in a meeting when the old you would have stayed silent. If you're assuming health, you might donate your old sick clothes. These acts from the end are not done to make something happen. They're done because you are already in the state where such actions are natural. They reinforce your assumption. They prove to yourself that you truly believe what you're assuming. But be wise about this. Don't spend money you don't have thinking it will make money appear. Don't quit your job believing that assuming wealth means you don't need to work. Use common sense. The acts from the end should be small, natural expressions of your new state, not reckless or irresponsible behavior. The man who assumed he was in Barbados didn't buy a plane ticket he couldn't afford. He simply fell asleep viewing the world from Barbados. The woman who assumed her husband's sobriety didn't quit her job or stop managing the household. She simply held the assumption of his health while continuing to function practically in the world. Acts from the end support your assumption. They don't replace it. The assumption is primary. The acts are secondary. But when combined, they create a powerful manifestation momentum. Now, I want to share something that will help you understand why imagination is God and not just a faculty of mind. Imagination is not something you have. Imagination is what you are. You are not a physical body that has an imagination. You are imagination temporarily occupying a physical body. The real you, the eternal you, the I am that is aware of being, is pure imagination, and this imagination is not limited by space, time, matter, or any physical law. This imagination can be anywhere, be anyone, experience anything. This imagination is infinite, eternal, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient. This imagination is God. When you imagine, you are not pretending. You are creating. You are not fantasizing. You are selecting from infinite possibilities. You are not daydreaming. You are entering other states, other realities, other dimensions of existence. This is why what you imagine must manifest, because imagination is the substance of all things. Everything you see in the physical world was first imagined. Every invention, every building, every piece of art, every achievement was first an act of imagination. Imagination is the creator. The physical world is the creation. When you truly understand this, when you truly accept that you are imagination and imagination is God, you realize there are no limits. Nothing is impossible. No desire is too great. No dream is unrealistic. Because you are the infinite creative power, imagining yourself to be this finite creature, and you can imagine yourself to be anything you choose. This is the great secret. This is the mystery of mysteries. You are God imagining yourself to be human, and you can imagine yourself to be any kind of human you choose, wealthy or poor, healthy or sick, loved or lonely, successful or struggling. The choice is yours. The power is yours. The responsibility is yours. Let me now address something that stops many people from fully embracing this teaching: the question of selfishness. Is it selfish to assume your desires fulfilled? Is it wrong to want things for yourself? Should you be focusing on others instead of yourself? I tell you, it is not selfish to assume your good. It is your divine right and responsibility. You are God individualized, and God's nature is to express, to create, to fulfill desire. When you suppress your desires out of false humility or misplaced altruism, you are denying your divine nature. Moreover, when you assume your own fulfillment, you raise the consciousness of the whole. Your success gives others permission to succeed. Your health inspires others to heal. Your abundance proves to others that abundance is possible. You are not taking from anyone by assuming your good. You are adding to the sum total of manifestation in the world. And here's something profound. When you truly assume the best for yourself, you automatically assume the best for others, because you cannot separate yourself from others. When you see yourself as abundant, you see others as abundant. When you know yourself as loved, you know others as lovable. When you experience yourself as blessed, you bless everyone you encounter. The consciousness that creates your good creates good for all. The assumption that manifests your desire makes manifestation easier for everyone. You are not in competition with anyone. There is no lack in consciousness. There is infinite abundance for all. Your having does not prevent anyone else from having. So assume boldly, desire freely, manifest abundantly, and in doing so, you will inspire, encourage, and empower everyone whose consciousness touches yours. Now let me give you a final profound teaching before we close. The understanding of who and what you really are. You are not this body. You are not these circumstances. You are not this personality. You are I am, the eternal, infinite awareness that exists before all things and continues after all things. This I am is God. Not a God separate from you, but the God that is you. When you say I am, you speak the name of the only God that exists, and whatever you attach to I am becomes your reality. I am is unconditioned awareness. It is pure being. It is consciousness without an object. Before you are anything specific, you are. And that isness, that pure awareness of being, is the creative power of the universe. When you add conditions to I am, when you say I am this or I am that, you limit the unlimited. You condition the unconditioned. You make finite the infinite. And you experience yourself as whatever you have declared yourself to be. But you can drop all conditions. You can return to pure I am. And from that unconditioned awareness, you can assume any condition you choose. You are not bound by past conditions. You are not limited by current circumstances. You are the infinite I am, free to assume any state, free to be anything, free to create any reality. This is liberation. This is freedom. This is the truth that sets you free. You are not the limited creature you appear to be. You are the unlimited creator pretending to be a creature. And the moment you remember this, the moment you awaken to your true identity, all things become possible. So know yourself, not as the personality, not as the body, not as the circumstances, but as I am, the eternal awareness, the infinite consciousness, the creative power, the God within. And from that knowing, assume what you will, create what you desire, manifest what you choose. Now let me give you one final technique, one last practice that brings together everything I've taught you. It's called the golden key, and it's the simplest yet most powerful practice I know. Whenever you find yourself worried, anxious, fearful, or doubting, stop. Stop thinking about the problem. Stop analyzing the situation. Stop trying to figure it out. Simply redirect your imagination to the wish fulfilled. Picture the end result. Feel it done. Assume it's accomplished, and hold that assumption until the worry dissolves. Don't fight the negative thought. Don't struggle against the fear. Simply replace it with the assumption of the wish fulfilled. This is the golden key. It opens every door. It solves every problem. It heals every condition. Not because it manipulates reality, but because it shifts consciousness, and consciousness creates reality. Use this golden key throughout your day. Every time a negative thought arises, turn the key. Every time fear knocks, turn the key. Every time doubt appears, turn the key. Replace every negative assumption with the assumption of the wish fulfilled, and watch how your world transforms. This practice alone, if done consistently, will revolutionize your life, because it trains you to live in the end at all times. It makes the wish fulfilled your default state. It reprograms your habitual consciousness, and habitual consciousness creates habitual experience. So practice the golden key. Make it automatic. Make it your instant response to every negative thought, every worried feeling, every doubtful moment. Replace the negative with the positive. Replace the problem with the solution. Replace the lack with the fulfillment, and your life will reflect that shift. Now, I want to leave you with this final truth before we close. But first, let me share one more profound teaching that will tie everything together and give you the master key to manifestation. Everything I've taught you can be summed up in one principle. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. That's it. That's the entire teaching. Everything else is commentary, explanation, illustration. But if you grasp this one principle and apply it faithfully, you can manifest anything. Assume means to take upon yourself, to accept as true without external proof, to occupy in consciousness. Feeling is not emotion, but the sense of naturalness, of isness, of already having. The wish fulfilled is the end result, the completed state, the accomplished fact. Put them together. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Live in the consciousness of having what you desire. Do this daily, nightly, constantly. Make it your habitual state. and the law must manifest your assumption. This is not a maybe. This is not a hopefully. This is certainty. This is law. This is the way consciousness works, the way reality is created, the way God expresses himself through you. Now let me tell you about the promise. Beyond the law, beyond manifestation, beyond getting what you want in this world, there is something greater. There is the mystical awakening, the birth of Christ in you, the discovery that you are God. I have experienced this. I have had the visions described in Scripture, not as future events to hope for, but as present realities to experience. I have seen David call me Father. I have felt the vibrations of the Holy Spirit. I have been split from top to bottom like a tree struck by lightning. I have witnessed my own birth from my own skull. These are not metaphors. They are actual mystical experiences that prove beyond any doubt that the Bible is not history but psychology, not external events but internal awakenings, not stories about other people but descriptions of your own journey from human to divine. This is the promise. Not that you will get everything you want in this world, though you will if you apply the law, but that you will discover you are God imagining yourself to be human, and that one day you will awaken from this dream of limitation and know yourself as the infinite creator. The law is for this life, for this world, for manifesting your desires. The promise is for awakening to your eternal identity. Both are yours, both are real, both are available to you. Use the law to transform your human experience. Embrace the promise to transcend it entirely. Let me also give you this understanding about miracles. There are no miracles in the sense of violations of natural law. What people call miracles are simply demonstrations of the law of consciousness creating reality. When the sick are healed instantly, that's not a miracle. That's assumption manifesting. When the poor become wealthy overnight, that's not luck. That's consciousness creating reality. When the dying revive, that's not divine intervention. That's the law in operation. You have access to all of this. Every so-called miracle is available to you through the power of assumption. Nothing is impossible to consciousness. No healing is beyond imagination. No manifestation is too great for the creative power that is your true self. Stop waiting for miracles to happen to you. Start creating them through you. You are the miracle worker. You are the one with the power. You are God in action. Assume what you will and watch it manifest. Now, let me share something about relationships and love, because this is where so many people struggle. You cannot change another person by force, by persuasion, by manipulation, but you can change your experience of them by changing your assumption about them. Everyone in your life is reflecting your consciousness back to you. The critical boss is reflecting your assumption that bosses are critical. The unavailable lover is reflecting your assumption of being unlovable, or your assumption that love is hard to find. The difficult family member is reflecting your assumption of conflict or challenge. Change your assumption and the reflection must change. This is law. There is no exception. If you assume someone loves you, they must show you love in your experience. They might not change objectively. They might still be difficult with others. But in your reality, in your experience, they will be loving because that's what you've assumed about them in your consciousness. This is how you heal relationships. Not by trying to change the other person, but by changing your consciousness of them. Assume they are kind, and they will be kind to you. Assume they are supportive, and they will support you. Assume they adore you, and they will show you adoration. And if a specific person doesn't match your assumption, the law will either transform their behavior toward you or remove them from your experience and bring someone who does match your assumption. But either way, your assumption manifests. You cannot hold an assumption and not see it reflected in your experience. So if you want love, assume yourself loved. If you want respect, assume yourself respected. If you want appreciation, assume yourself appreciated. The specific person through whom this comes is less important than the state of consciousness you occupy. Occupy the state, and the appropriate person will appear. Let me now speak about something that many people ask about. Can you manifest for others? Can you assume health for your sick friend? Can you assume success for your struggling child? Can you imagine good for someone else? The answer is yes, but understand what's actually happening. When you assume good for another, you are not changing them out there. You are changing your consciousness of them in here. And since your entire world is your consciousness pushed out, when you change your consciousness of someone, your experience of them must change. I have seen mothers heal their children through assumption. I have seen wives transform their husbands. I have seen friends lift each other into success, not by trying to fix the other person, but by assuming the other person whole, well, prosperous, and happy. But you cannot assume for someone who is actively assuming the opposite with greater intensity. If someone is deeply committed to their illness, their poverty, their limitation, your assumption for them might not override their assumption for themselves. However, your assumption creates your experience of them, and sometimes your loving assumption can inspire them to assume better for themselves. The most loving thing you can do for anyone is to assume the best for them, see them whole, know them blessed, imagine them successful, hold that vision until they rise to meet it. This is true prayer. Not begging God to fix them, but assuming they are already perfected in consciousness and persisting in that assumption. Now, let me address one more common question. What about things that seem beyond your control? What about natural disasters, accidents, deaths? Can you manifest those away through assumption? Remember, your consciousness creates your experience. Your world is your consciousness objectified. You might not control what happens in the world at large, but you control what happens in your world. You can assume safety, and safety will be your experience. You can assume protection, and you will be protected. You can assume divine order, and things will work out for your good. I have known people who assumed safety and walked away from accidents that should have killed them. I have known people who assumed divine protection and were led away from danger before it struck. I have known people who assumed perfect timing and missed planes that later crashed. Your consciousness is your guardian. Your assumption is your shield. What you persistently assume must be your experience. So assume the best. Assume divine protection. Assume perfect order. Assume that all things work together for your good, and they will. This doesn't mean you become reckless or foolish. You still use common sense. You still take reasonable precautions. But you don't live in fear. You don't worry about all the terrible things that could happen. You assume the best and trust your consciousness to protect you, guide you, and create experiences that match your assumption. Let me also tell you about the importance of forgiveness in this teaching. Forgiveness is not about letting someone off the hook for what they did. Forgiveness is about freeing yourself from the assumption that keeps recreating the offense in your consciousness. When you hold a grudge, when you maintain resentment, when you keep reliving the hurt, you are assuming a state of being wronged, and that assumption keeps creating experiences of being wronged. You trap yourself in a cycle of victimhood through your own consciousness. But when you forgive, you change your assumption. You no longer identify with being wronged. You no longer carry the consciousness of offense. You free yourself from that state and open yourself to better experiences. Forgiveness is not condoning wrong behavior. It's not saying what happened was okay. It's simply refusing to keep assuming the identity of victim. It's revising the past in consciousness so that it no longer determines your present and future. This is why Christ, which is imagination, can forgive all sins. Because when you imagine a different past, when you revise the offense, when you assume a different identity than victim, you literally forgive, you release the past, you free yourself, you change your consciousness, and therefore change your experience. Practice revision, practice forgiveness, not for others, though they benefit from the changed consciousness you project onto them, but for yourself. To free yourself from the prison of negative assumptions that keep recreating painful experiences. Now, let me share one final story that demonstrates everything I've taught you. There was a woman who was facing bankruptcy, divorce, and a serious health crisis all at the same time. Her business was failing. Her husband was leaving. Her body was breaking down. By all appearances, her life was falling apart. She could have assumed disaster. She could have occupied the consciousness of victim. She could have given up. But instead, she decided to assume the opposite. She created a scene that implied everything was perfect. In her imagination, she saw herself healthy, successful, and loved. She felt herself whole, prosperous, and at peace. And she lived in that assumption every single day, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Her accountant told her to declare bankruptcy. She thanked him and continued assuming prosperity. Her doctor told her she needed surgery. She thanked him and continued assuming perfect health. Her husband moved out. She blessed him and continued assuming divine order in all her relationships. For months, the outer world contradicted her assumption. But she never wavered. She knew the law. She understood that consciousness creates reality. She trusted that if she persisted in her assumption, it must harden into fact. And then, as always happens when assumption is persisted in, the bridge of incidents formed. An unexpected opportunity saved her business and made it more profitable than ever. Her health condition reversed without surgery, and her husband, after some time apart, recognized his mistake and returned with genuine change in his heart. Was this a miracle? Only if you don't understand the law. To her, it was simply the inevitable result of assumption manifesting. She assumed the best despite the worst. She occupied the consciousness of fulfillment despite the appearance of failure. She persisted in faith despite all the reasons to doubt, and the law rewarded her faithfulness with manifestation. This is what's possible for you. This is the power you possess. This is the law at work. No matter how bad things look, no matter how impossible the situation seems, you can assume the opposite. You can occupy the consciousness of the wish fulfilled. You can persist in faith, and you will see your assumption manifest. The only question is, will you do it? Will you actually apply this teaching? Or will you just think about it, agree with it intellectually, but continue living in the same old assumptions that have been creating your current reality? The teaching is simple, but application requires discipline, persistence, and faith. Most people will hear this, nod their heads, say it makes sense, and then continue assuming lack, limitation, fear, and doubt. They will not change because they will not do the work of changing their consciousness. But you can be different. You can actually apply this. You can make the commitment to assume the wish fulfilled every day, every night, until it manifests. You can become vigilant over your inner speech. You can practice sats faithfully. You can live in the Sabbath of the wish fulfilled. And if you do, your life will transform. Not maybe, not hopefully, but certainly, because this is law. And law works for everyone who applies it, without exception, without favoritism, without failure. Now here is my final instruction before we close. First, choose one desire, not 5, not 10, one. Something specific that you want to experience. Make it clear, make it definite. Write it down if that helps. I am blank. Fill in the blank with what you desire to be or to have. Second, construct a scene that implies this desire is fulfilled. What would you experience after you have it? Not the process of getting it, not the moment of receiving it, but after, when it's yours, when it's done, when it's accomplished. Create a simple scene that implies this completion. Third, tonight, as you lie in bed preparing for sleep, relax your body completely. Induce the state akin to sleep, and in that state, run your scene. See it, feel it, hear it, sense it, make it vivid, make it real, and loop it until you fall asleep, saturated with the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Fourth, do this every night for 30 days. Not sometimes, not when you remember, not when you feel like it, every night, without exception. 30 days of consistent practice. And fifth, during the day, monitor your inner speech. When you catch yourself affirming the opposite of your desire, stop, redirect, speak to yourself from the wish fulfilled. Assume it in your inner conversations. Let your internal dialogue match your desired end. That's it. That's the practice. Simple but not easy. Easy to understand but hard to persist in. But if you will do it, if you will actually apply it instead of just thinking about it, you will prove the law. You will see your assumption manifest. And once you see it manifest once, you will know, and that knowing will change everything. You came here seeking a method. I've given you a law. You came here hoping for change. I've shown you that change is not something you create out there. It's something you choose in here by entering a new state of consciousness. The life you want is not distant. It's not waiting for the right time, the right person, the right circumstance. It's here now. In this eternal moment, existing as a state of consciousness, you have the power to occupy. Every time you say I am, you speak the name of God. And what follows those words, what you assume yourself to be, becomes your reality. Not because I say so, but because it is law. It is the way consciousness works. It is the mechanism by which the infinite becomes finite, the invisible becomes visible, the imagined becomes experienced. The transformation is this. You are not a victim of the world. You are the creator of your world. You are not waiting for life to give you what you desire. You are assuming the consciousness of already having it, and life is rearranging itself to reflect that assumption back to you. So, here is your mantra. Speak it to yourself. Let it sink deep into your consciousness. Let it become the foundation of your new way of being. I am not waiting for my life to change. I am changing my life by changing who I know myself to be. I am not hoping for the best. I am assuming the best. I am not becoming. I am. And what I am in consciousness, I must express in experience. Now go. Enter the state. Occupy the feeling. Remain faithful. And watch as the invisible becomes visible, as assumption hardens into fact, as the life you want, which was always here, always now, opens itself to you. You are God. You are the Creator. You are the operant power. There is nothing outside of you to fear, to beg, to wait for. Everything you desire is a state of consciousness away. Enter that state. Live in that state. Persist in that state. And it is yours. If this resonates with you, if you feel the truth of what I've shared, let me know. Leave a comment telling me what state you're choosing to occupy, what assumption you're making your own. Tell me about your wins, your breakthroughs, your proofs of the law, because your success encourages others. Your testimony proves the law to those who doubt. And subscribe, because this is not the end of the teaching. This is only the beginning of your awakening. There is so much more to explore, so much more to understand, so many more mysteries to reveal. But it all starts with this. Assume, feel, persist. The life you want is here now. It has always been here. It has always been now. The only question is, will you open yourself to it? Will you enter the state? Will you occupy the consciousness of the wish fulfilled? I have given you the law. I have shown you the way. The rest is up to you. Go and prove it. Go and be it. Go and live it. The kingdom of heaven is within you. And heaven is simply the state of consciousness that matches your desire. Enter it now. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. I am. And what I am, I express. What I assume, I experience. What I persist in, I manifest. This is the law. This is the way. This is the truth that sets you free. Now go and be free.